Christina, we're on application number 3. Could you please call the order?
Okay, we're on, our next application is number 1 Pond Lane LLC and Hopkins.
Is the applicant present?
This one, Pond?
Yes.
Yeah.
We can close the door, please, because it's kind of difficult hearing.
John Bennett for the applicant, One Pond Lane, LLC in Hawkwitz. Hopefully the board received a copy of the Louis Berger report, which is Steve Bedford is the principal architectural historian from Louis Berger. It wouldn't be fair to suggest that you'd had, I just want to make sure you all have it and that Zach has it. Do you have it, Zach?
But I'm remiss, I haven't checked.
No. I wouldn't expect that you have reports.
Oh, fine. Okay.
I wouldn't expect that you have a comment to it this evening, so I'll, as with the previous application, be respectfully asking that you adjourn the matter, to give you time. But I did have some comments that I thought...
So you're asking for us to adjourn this?
No. Well, ultimately, I will, but I have some comments to make before I make that request. I just wanted to put the board at ease that I didn't expect them to have been able to have read this. It's very simple. So anyway, this is an early 1950s gas station and repair building. Obviously, it was built in the 1950s, and thus after this magic 1926 date contained in the village code, and that's critical. The building has been owned by the current family since the 1950s. The property is non-contributing. So this property has been owned by the current family for more than 35 years prior to the creation of the Village Historic District, and that goes in not only to the lack of any self-created hardship, but also what the federal courts call their investment-backed expectation. I want to make sure some of the things that I've heard bandied about the villages, wouldn't it be wonderful to repurpose this building? That's a fantasy. It's difficult at best to bring this into compliance with any contemporary modern gas storage requirements. Its proximity to groundwater for gas storage. Those requirements have specific bedding, buffering, and anchoring requirements, as well as groundwater monitoring requirements. Very expensive and simply not achievable in this location. I'm not aware if everyone is. I don't know if everyone is aware of this, but it's probably 2 to 3 feet of groundwater in that area. I have the benefit of just in terms of knowledge of that area. My dad, if he was alive today, would be 105. He used to tell me when he was a kid, Lake Agawam was all swamp. So when you look out at Lake Agawam, he was born in 1918, and when you look out at Lake Agawam, what you saw before the Second World War was swamp. That's all landfill. So the result of that is that will never be a gas station again. It could never comply with the current storage requirements for petroleum. People have thought this could be repurposed for a restaurant. The Suffolk County Health Department requirements would not allow that, and it has nowhere near the type of size in the terms of lot or the ability to achieve any sort of meaningful recharge of wastewater that would allow a restaurant, nor would it come anywhere close to the parking requirements.
John?
Yes.
I know there's going to be commentary by our historic consultant.
Right.
And I'll have you do so so the record is built. But
Let me finish up.
just going to poll the board to see if anyone has an issue with the application, because it doesn't seem like the board has an issue. But I do want to make sure
Okay.
the record is full and that it's thorough and that it's taken. I know you have more information to
That's
give.
fine.
However, I think on the surface, it didn't seem like the board had opposition of the application. Let's have a historic consultant give his evaluation, just so the record's full and prepared, but please proceed.
Thank you.
Zach, I know you had some comments about the building.
Now I do have an 18-page report. The last application was only 2, I swear. I'll try to make it brief.
Okay.
I don't usually have the opportunity to stand here. This is great, standing up. I had filed a report. This has been adjourned for quite some time because my report was dated in October the 20th. So this goes back quite some time. I just felt that it was important, speaking as a preservationist, that I kind of speak up on behalf of this rather modest building, which I understand may be an improbable object for concern. But looking quickly at Mr. Berger's report, I think it's also the board and public applicants need to know why a building built in the 1930s or 40s or even 1950 might have eluded the survey that we all base our concerns about, whether things are contributing or not. And the reason is the survey was done in 1979. So it's very likely that a building built in 1951 hadn't achieved any sort of historical status, understanding, appreciation, etc. It was 27 years old at the time. And Mr. Berger points out that we should adhere to that survey from 79 as if it's a static document. I would suggest we're all growing older. The buildings that we're living with and achieving some sort of level of preservation of are also growing older. And so structures built in the 30s or 40s that were not understood or identified in 1979 might very well deserve a second chance. So let me just set sort of the architectural scene of this. It's what's commonly referred to now as in the Art Moderne or the Streamline Moderne style. Okay. And it was typically employed in the post-war era for modern products such as automobiles. So this is a common connection. I wanted to start by showing the neighborhood. I'd like to see the history. You're going to see this on. And this is, I don't know if you can zoom in on this, Charlie. Okay. That's the neighborhood. And, heading in the right direction? Yeah. So here's the property down here at the corner where Culver comes down and Hill Street. And at this time, this is 1873. The grist mill stood there. Coincidentally, there was a wagon shed on the property, and there was also a machine shop over there. So that was the neighborhood in the 1870s. Fast forward to 1926, and the neighborhood has changed a lot. This corner is still residential, but all these arrows, of which there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 arrows, 1926, point to service stations and garages. This neighborhood is fast changing from residential to a service station neighborhood because it's servicing the estate section, which is quite nearby. Okay. And this is where you would park your cars, I suppose, seasons that you're not there. This is where you would service your automobile. So by 1926, what had been formerly a very residential neighborhood has flipped into a commercial one, but what is specifically, except for the movie theater, almost all garages and service stations. That's by 1926. Then what happens after the war, cars are getting faster, and all of that moves to the outskirts of town, typically. I mean, that's the usual trend. In this case, we have the building being constructed for A.A. Jennings as a showroom for selling and servicing Chrysler automobiles. Its architect, interestingly enough, was William Lafon II, who was kind of a local celebrity. He designs Southampton Town Hall, the original one, at the corner. He designs the high school, now Town Hall, new Town Hall, as well as the grade school. And this is all in the 1920s. So what's interesting about this building, it's rather late in his career. It's documented to have been built in 1951, I believe, 52, sorry. And so there's a bit of a record of Mr. Jennings and his automobile business. He advertises locally in the Star and in the County Review and in the Sag Harbor Express. He goes sort of quiet after 28, 29. Depression kind of put him out of business for a while. But he's back in business by 38, and then there's a flurry of advertising in 1951 and 52, and that seems to be in conjunction with his new presentation, his new showroom. So the one thing I think it's important to, here's my notes, to realize is that this particular building, while now it's a repair shop, basically, is that when built, it was built in a style that was then quite unique to that function, the automobile showroom of the 1940s and 50s. So I thought it might be interesting for you to see, by comparison, some representative examples. And why these are important is that this is now a recognized architectural building type. And for those of us who spent a lot of time surveying structures and researching not only historic districts, but also listings for the National Register, the way the State Historic Preservation Office works, the background that you need to provide nowadays is far more detailed, and a lot more scholarship goes into these projects than was the case 30 or 40 years ago when I started doing this kind of work. And nowadays, you start by identifying building types, and then you see if there are those types in your area that are representative of the history and the evolution of neighborhoods and communities, etc. These are all examples of the type from, where my notes just went, from around the country. The one on the lower right is in Kansas. That's on the multiple property documentation form. It's a National Register district of roadside architecture in Kansas. These are structures. The one in the middle and the bottom is in Beverly Hills. The upper right is in Canada. So these are automobile showrooms which are distinctive of this type. There's a lot of horizontal banding, large plate glass windows. These are obviously not frame structures. These are masonry buildings, typically stuccoed, a lot of sheet metal on them. And so our B&M Auto, let's put it right here in the middle. I'm afraid this is a slightly fuzzy photograph.
Are any of those other pictures or photos that you're proposing up there, are you showing up there, any of those designated landmarks in their communities?
Yes. I'd have to check the others, but the lower right, which is in Kansas, is a contributing architectural resource in their multiple property documentation form. That's a fancy word for a historic district, which is spread over a large landscape. So in their case, they were picking up on various building types. They could be service stations, they could be churches, they could be any number of specific building forms that in the totality reflected the evolving history of that place. And it's important to remember, again, to Mr. Berger's contention that we're stuck with a document from 1979, the National Register recognizes a moving date in terms of what's eligible for consideration, and that's 50 years. Our village has 1927 in the code as a date before which we express interest in the history of a building. National Register, it's now up to 1967. Okay.
So the other buildings that are currently landmarked, are they currently operating, and not that looking at the overall operations being the relevance of
Yep.
historical landmarking, but are they currently operating as such, or have they changed and now they're, I mean, you showcase one.
Yeah,
which is
I was using these to simply illustrate the form, the
Okay.
type of building, so that, just so that we don't.
So it's not a frequent thing that you would see a showroom or a garage landmarked in a historic district?
What I would say now, if we were to put a National Register district together, I'm positing this because we're not doing it, but if we were to research the village now and propose a National Register district of individual contributing elements, there's no question that this building would be considered as such. And the reason I'm saying that is that the lower right-hand corner, it's quite similar to the garage that we're talking about, is such a contributing component. And the continuation sheets is what we call them when we go on to hundreds of pages of descriptions, goes on for 4 pages in this National Register document, identifying the property type, which is an auto showroom and dealership. That's the type. And because this was a statewide district, they were probably able to pick up 20 or 30 of these across the state. But this was done 2 years ago. And therefore, buildings from the 40s or 50s are being considered as of historical interest. Okay. So before we just say not in the inventory, I would submit that this is an example of the sort of building which, through the passage of time, gained some historical interest and relevance. And in fact, if we put it into the context of the neighborhood where it was built, it was very consistent with the development of that neighborhood at the time. I know it's inconvenient to have gas stations and garages in small downtown areas these days. I get that. But that's a use thing, and that's not the history, that's just the reality of where it happens to stand. So I just thought I would bring that perspective to this before we close the discussion on the building.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I guess I should answer questions or no? No.
Just to pull the board.
Very good.
Jeff, did you have any comments?
No, I'd like to take John up on his offer and consider it. I'll be frank with you, I'm torn. I go back and forth on this because it's a cute building. When I say it's a cute building, people have recognized that it's a fixture in town. And at the same time, its use is greatly restricted. The town is not enhanced by having cars standing out there, and I know you do the best job of keeping it as well as you can, but it's not. If I could wave my magic wand, you'd find a buyer that wants to keep it exactly as it is, and they make it into funky office. I know it's not in our lifetime ever going to become a restaurant. Like you say, John, the water table, you could probably put a spade in it and you'd come up with water. So for me, it's a difficult decision. I'd like to preserve it, but I'm not sure on a practical basis in terms of the intended use of the property that it can be. So I'd like to take John up on his offer to consider a bit further.
Susan?
Well, after Zach's recitation, I need some time to think. I had agreed with Mr. Bedford in the beginning, but now that he's shown me those photographs, and I do think this building is in great disrepair. It's unfortunate. But that's sort of the problem of the owners, that shouldn't, so we'll see. I mean, I don't think that's a good excuse, so I need more time, please.
Christine?
I wish I had a magic wand too, but I can't see what, if we preserve this building, what it would be used for. I'm sure there's some environmental hazards there, and I just feel like I don't think that we can landmark it.
On the surface, you made comments about the architect reflecting he was a part of this, the schools, both school and also town hall. And I say if those were the two buildings being presented today, no question asked. When we start making museums out of car dealerships, I get a little concerned, and then I get concerned about how far we're really going to go to try to, and trust me, there's a lot of things, a lot of structures we should preserve, and we've done the best we could over time, but I think that there are limits to it, and you bring a very good representation from a national standpoint on garages. However, I still don't believe that's to the limit of us looking at this as a fight to make it a contributing structure in the historic district. I just don't see that right now, standing as I sit right now. But It seems the board members want time to review and think about it and then dissect what was given and what was presented. I'm sure John has more information he wants to personally to either reflect or to debate, but I just can't see this being that fight. There's some that were worth fighting. I don't see this being that fight.
Actually, I think these are really helpful because in my own dilettante-ish architectural historian/critic way, these are significantly different. They have much more architectural detail. They are generally...
Pictures are just better.
Okay. They are generally multi-material in style, and they're more reflective of Art Deco. Look at this. This has an aluminum fascia on it, and a metal fascia on the other buildings. It doesn't have a much more distinctive architectural detail. So I don't see how this, if I may, with all due respect to the Hawkins family, rises to the level of these, which are sort of idiomatic roadside architecture. Because they have that sort of multi-textured, multi-material detail, more harkening back to the Art Deco. I might also add that how has the village treated these 50s gas stations in the past? The old Grattan gas station on Hampton Road and David White's Lane is now the Range Rover, a significant retrofit. Ernie Wilson's garage is now no more and has a branch of the Bridgehampton National Bank there, and these were both design changes or demolitions that happened while the village had its historic district in force. So I'll just ask you to consider those factors as well.
But those weren't, but they weren't historic, they weren't buildings that were unusual.
There's this. Oh, actually, the Grattan garage was very, very similar to this, extremely similar to it. I remember it well because John Grattan was my uncle, and I spent a lot of time at that place. It was very similar in construction to this.
Where was that? Where
it's on the corner of
David White's Lane?
and
Okay.
Hampton Road. It's now the Range Rover.
Range Rover, right. Actually, I
Looked
probably...
very much like it.
Any public comment on the application? All right, board members still want time to digest the information?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Okay. And the applicant has already requested to do so. So motion to approve applicant's request to adjourn until our next meeting.
Make a motion that we approve the applicant One Pond Lane LLC and Hawkwitz request to adjourn to our next meeting.
Motion by Christina. Is there
I
a
second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor? Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And Curtis is aye. Next application, please.
The next application is David Hulin on Little Plains Road.
Is the applicant present?
No. Isn't that the one with
So
the window?
vertical window, yeah.
Well, you...
All right. Motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
I make a motion that we adjourn the application of David Hulin on Little Plains Road.
Motion by Christina. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor? Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And Curtis is aye. Next application, please.
Halcyon Lodge.
You want your pictures?
No one else does.
Oh, they were nice.
Put yourself in someone else's.
I do, every day.
What happened to the 50%?
Good evening, Melissa Dedovich, Peconic Environmental Associates. I'm here on behalf of Halcyon Lodge LLC. I'm also here with Matt Horvath from Chris LaGuardia Design. Their firm is the one who designed the driveway gates that you have in front of you. You might recall this property. It's the one currently being renovated and with additions on either side. It's a historic house that's over on 436 Gin Lane. It's a 1.5 acre property on the ocean. Currently, there are 2 entrances with brick piers we're reducing this per previous approvals with both the ARB and the ZBA to just one entrance, which will be right here.
Just one curb cut, is that what you're saying?
Sorry?
So I'm gonna-
Correct.
there'll only be one curb.
And as you know, if you've driven by, which I'm sure you have, you drive and it goes up to a hill. As you know, it's rather prominent setting where the house is. So here is the gates.
What is the amount, what is the spacing, amount of space of the actual closed area or the panel area? What's the height?
The solid portion
It's
is
5 feet. 5 feet with the
You have a
2 by 4.
5-foot gate, and then you have the lattice above, or the
Correct.
opening.
But we also put in these 2 by 4 diamond cuts.
Yeah, you're not matching, we've stood firm on at least a minimum of 50% transparency of the gate overall, just because of the panelization. It shows as a stockade fence. I know the board members are going to have some concerns or issues about that, so I'm just mentioning it now.
I actually did mention that, and we have option B, which, because I was asked by the client that she really, 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 really wanted. You know, when I bring things in front of you, I told the client, I said, this is going to be a big issue.
Especially a historic house. Yeah, okay.
You're preaching to the choir. I had to
Okay,
present
okay.
the first one, that's why I had to present the first one.
May I
do you
say
have the-
something just as a matter of,
Yes.
we spend time looking at the files. And I go visit the property. I visit every property, I view every file. So for you to come in here, and please don't take it personally, because I realize you're representing our client, but it's a waste of our time. And please
Frankly,
don't do it again.
I have an issue with that because as a representative of the client, my job is to present what they want, is to guide them, but at the end of the day, to present what they wish. Now, what I was able to do, this is actually up to a 43%. They dropped this an additional 6 inches. And the other thought, there's a lot of thought that went into this particular gate, I have to say. If you look at the picture up here, this gate is to reflect the historic renovation that's being done. This is a 3.5-story house. It's very prominent. So they're trying to give some depth and everything with regard to, what's the word I'm looking for?
Scale.
Thank you. Scale with the house, and that's why we gave the rendering here. So this is the, dropped an additional 6 inches, 3-inch wide openings. The spindles are made to match the spindles on the railing.
So you just dropped the panel by 6 inches.
Drop the open, yes, exactly.
And that's part and part what Jeff was mentioning. We came in here with, looking at a set of plans where there wasn't spacing. Now you're saying that your remedy to that is reducing it by 6 inches
Correct.
and opening up the spacing.
Yes.
Still not achieving the 50% transparency.
No, it's about 45.
So we still are at it.
Still?
We're still at it.
Okay.
There you go.
All right.
Now, just so because of a matter of reference, and because it was said there's no prohibition from any applicant bringing in a set of plans the night of, doesn't mean we have to look at them.
Understood.
Yeah, and.
Understood. And I will say, and I think you're familiar with my office, this had already been submitted, the original one.
Right.
This was after talking to them for the last, if you do recall, this was adjourned from the last hearing because we were having these discussions.
Okay.
So let me also share with you, apart from my ire regarding the switcheroo, which you perfectly have the right to do, and representing your client well. In looking for transparency, as we have over a board in the 2 years I've been serving on it, and Curtis for, 6 times that amount of time.
13.
13. 6 times, okay.
I've been going for this board for 25 years, so I understand.
Well, you started as a teenager. But you're doing a great job on restoring that house and preserving that house. And it would be wonderful if the people who come to visit Jim Lane on the beach get a chance to see the great work you do. That area at one time, even in the short time I've been in the village, wasn't devoid of hedges, but we're moving more and more towards a hedged and gated community. And one of the nice things about our beachfronts, even if they're accessible at multiple points through the village, through the town, through the county. It's a wonderful thing, very different than other communities, Greenwich, Connecticut being one of them. That feeling of openness is something that should also be reflected in the design. and adding more non-transparent fencing, non-transparent hedging takes away from that. So I wanted to share with you some of my thinking, which I think might, I know Curtis
Well,
has said
let me just say,
before.
one of the reasons why I felt I could present this is that if you actually look at the topography and you are familiar with that property, the way it goes, that property itself goes
Right.
from grade where the pond is
Yeah.
and goes up about 20-something feet, the elevation of the property itself. So I felt actually you're really not losing. I understand the transparency when you're driving down Meadow Lane, when things like grade. This is a different, it's a different situation, and this board looks at each situation as site-specific. So I did feel when they dropped this down, even though it's only 40-something%, that perhaps because of the fact that this is an unusual property, it is a historic property, you're not losing any view of the house that we're trying to restore.
Not just the house.
Yeah,
It's not
he's
just the
right.
house. And that's where where I guess we're losing some of the interpretation. When you're riding bike down the road, when you're running, when you're walking, when you're driving in a car, there's a vista that every person is looking at. It's not just the house, it's the corridors, the yard. And we understand that. And we understand the value in some of these homes and the
Right.
cost of some of these homes. So
They can look at the pond on the other
they're way
side.
out there. But however, with that said, we still have our obligation and responsibility. And I'm sure you've driven down Gin Lane, you've driven down Meadow, and there are probably some fences there that were not approved by this board, but they're up for whatever reason. But they weren't approved by this board. You're here presenting an application before this board now, and therefore we have to look at yours independently. And what we're saying is that there's something we want to maintain. If we can rewrite it specifically in the code, I would ask that we do soon. But
Actually, it would
we've
be
been
very
firm.
helpful. It would be very
We've been very-
helpful because my client actually
But the
is it
fact
in
that
the
we've been
code.
doing it, we set the precedent. And
Understood.
therefore, and that's the reason why we've been consistent in doing so.
And again, the reason why I felt we could bring it is just the site-specific nature of this, is that it's
Understood.
not an elevated, so, not on an even ground thing. So, okay, we'll
Thank
be
you.
back.
Thank you.
If we can also
See if there's any
adjourn
public
this.
comment, and then, is there any public comment on the application? Anything further from the board?
No, I thought you
And
explained
thank you,
it
Melissa,
extremely
I
well.
do appreciate it.
No, no problem.
No,
Appreciate you saying.
really, you did.
Thank you.
You're asking this board to adjourn so you can prepare yourself for the next meeting, correct?
Correct.
All right.
Thank
Motion to approve applicant's request to adjourn into our next meeting.
I make a motion that we accept the applicant
Approve
house...
the applicant's request. Approve.
Okay, approve the applicant's request, Halcyon Lodge on Gin Lane to adjourn to our next meeting.
Motion by
very much.
Christina.
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor? Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Final historic application for this evening.
It's Cooper's Neck,
Cooper's Neck.
Last
LLC.
time.
65?
Yeah.
It's closed.
We did that last time.
Right, exactly.
Thank you. So, hey, cross that off.
That concludes our historic applications for this evening. We have a formal request for review. No,
Mitchell.
that's evidently already done unless they're,
No, we did it last time. We approved
It
it.
was closed for, well,
Written decision.
for written decision, but you
excuse me, but this is the driveway gates. Was the driveway gates
Oh.
included in the approval?
Remember, was that the gas lights?
Correct, and we had the architect sign 2 sets of
Yeah,
plans.
so-
Okay, so it's closed for
Okay.
written decision by council.
Okay.
We don't have a written decision on that, so
There you
That's
go.
okay, Gage, okay, yeah, right, good.
Cool.
That's right, we've had the gas lights.
Well, that concludes our historic applications. We do have a formal request to review an application under 11628K for, this is the Mitchell Family Limited Partnership.
in the file is a decision reporting to the Board of Appeals that that this board has no issue with continuing the historic status of the application, of the subject building.
It's not an official application, but we do have a
It's
written
a
recommendation.
it's a reference to this.
And therefore, we have a written reference by council. The motion would be to approve the written reference by council for Mitchell Family Limited Partnership.
That is correct.
I make a motion that we approve the written reference by council for Mitchell Family Limited Partnership on Great Plains Road.
There's a motion by Christina, is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Ms. Stevens. Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. All right. What? No. Next application, please.
The next application, we are now moving on to non-historic, is Christopher and Jean Lynch on Roscoe Drive. And I have to recuse.
For the applicant, John Bennett, and the architect, Mayron, is here with me. One of the things that, what we tried to do, and Mayron will take you through it, I think there were some board members that didn't have a problem, but I think, and again, it's always hard to get into somebody's mind, but I think Mr. Broadleaf's concern was that the previous extension seemed like a needless extension of the existing architecture. Jeff?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Okay,
I'm
just
sorry.
wanted to point this out. Okay, thank you, because it's really for you, if we can. So we went back to the drawing board and said, what do we need here? We need some relief. Because I think, again, I can't get into your mind, but my thought was that
not sure
what
you
you
wanna go
saw...
there.
What your thought was that the extension of a shingle-style house and the wood shingle in the area that was going to be in front of the pool didn't have the necessary relief. So what we've done, quite frankly, is to try to make it look like a conservatory, which is a significant change and a significant break in the architecture, and also to make it look as if it perhaps has the aspects of an accessory structure, but de facto only, because we do have the connection which is necessary in order to make it part of the existing house. So we thought quite candidly that this was a creative way to break up, but to extend the house. And by the way, as we demonstrated, this house is not at all larger in proportion than many of the houses that have recently been developed, but to give it that relief. At first, we had looked at some. You had approved a house in the historic district that had a much more fanciful conservatory, and it went from sort of Georgian brick to a conservatory, almost like a folly-like conservatory, but we wanted to keep it more conservative.
What house is that?
I'll bring it in for you. It might be over on Barnard. I think it was over on Barnard. You may not have been on the board. It might have been 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, no. It's on First Neck. It's that private road off of First Neck. 101 First Neck. Yeah, you were on the board. You approved it, yeah. It was quite a almost like a folly, like it's a shingle-style house, and the addition off the back was a
101?
101. Yeah, 101 is it's like a private road
Yeah, I
down
know.
past all the stuff that George Submersion built.
Yeah. I have to.
But in any event, Mayron.
So can I just ask, since we only see the front of this, how deep, why, is it just a facade? What is
No.
It's an actual conservatory. It is...
How wide is it?
It's the same, the dimensions haven't changed.
What are the dimensions then? 'Cause I don't see any. How about that?
They're in the old file. It's been 5 meetings, and I have...
Oh,
We'll get it for you. I think it's 8 to 9 feet.
It's approximately 8 feet, correct?
8 feet.
Yes.
8 feet?
8 feet.
8?
Yes.
Fancy one. Little greenhouse off the side.
Excuse me?
So it looks like a little greenhouse off the side.
Clearly what we're trying to do.
That's
My guess
exactly the
was,
intention.
I think, from what Mr. Bartley described, he said, now you have this width without relief, so this is what...
So you went with the metal roof.
Yeah.
Is there panelization? Is it white? What's the material of the, between the windows?
Is that white or is
It looks white in the...
Answer the question. Is that white? It's white, so it's wooden. It's also quite a bit more expensive to do,
And then-
as one you can imagine.
So what I'm seeing here in the rendering
Yes, sir.
is a representation of what you're proposing, which is the white
Correct. Correct.
with...
Is it stepped back at all?
It does step back from this surface, correct.
How far? It's just hard to tell. I hate to be like that.
Well, this is sort of a scheme.
It's a scheme.
Yeah,
Not
it's
Okay,
about
well-
2 feet.
I'm trying to get on board here with the skiing.
Okay, thank you. How far back is it, Steph?
Well, I'll tell you exactly how far.
4 feet, 3 feet?
No, not that
No,
much. No.
it's about 2
foot?
feet.
How much, Mayor?
It's about 2 feet.
2 feet. So it gives some additional relief as
I
well.
want to take it back. It's about 12 inches,
Oh.
1 foot.
There we go.
Yes. The plans haven't changed. The facade and the material have changed. And the intention was to make this
What they're trying to do
transparent.
is they're trying to minimize the visual
Right,
impact by
of the-
making it more like a
An extra thing.
accessory structure rather than part of the
House.
Correct, correct. This is the last meeting's rendering.
We
One
didn't
of-
didn't
Yeah,
like
still
that, so
Okay,
let's
no,
let's
no,
let's
I'm
not
just-
go back there.
All right, all right.
Come on, Mayor,
Okay.
help me out here.
So instead of being just a thing that stuck out there, you've added on to it?
No.
No, it's the same dimension as was
Same exact
previously.
dimensions as the previous
But it's a significant architectural
Just
relief,
a
though.
I see.
quick
It
history.
says-
We try to put
Yeah, the trees in front of the...
Try to put
Yeah,
trees in
I
front of
remember that.
the building.
People like it,
Then
some people
wasn't
didn't
it
like
was-
that, so we took it away.
Got it.
We put the
Okay.
magnet on, but actually, we think this is quite stunning.
Something else? In addition to that, if you recall, in the past 3 or 4 meetings, the house also changed. It went from a 2-story look to a 1.5-story look.
Those are
So
not those were not the arguments for tonight. I
No.
don't think we want to readdress them. We'll just discuss the annex here.
Sure.
So what the applicant is proposing is this a reasonable alternative to the visual impact that makes the house look too long or too massive for the lot? That's what they're proposing, that's what they're asking this evening.
Well, okay.
Jeff, what's your, any
Well-
comments?
I'm still concerned about the scaling and also about the absurdity of the position we're in, which is,
Can I just interject here?
No.
If the zoning board of appeals had done what they've done on probably 3 or 4
That's what we think.
other
Right.
applications, I wouldn't be here. But I had all this opposition to the zoning board of appeals, and they say, can you make it conform? And I say, oh, okay. So that's why I'm here.
I
So it's a
understand.
real frustration.
Yeah,
The zoning board of appeals has typically, when you meet, in this instance, you meet all of the side yard setbacks, all of the pool setbacks. I meet the front yard setback for both principal and accessory structures. I've got 3 front yards. They say, sure, that's a textbook practical difficulty. But I had serious opposition. I don't know why. They did something that is very unusual for the zoning board of appeals, which is they didn't follow, that board follows its own precedent. They're very, very, very consistent. I don't know why. I wish I wasn't here. I wish I wasn't having to make this argument, but that's where I have been brought.
And they suggested that you come here if you
Well,
weren't
this is
happy?
what they said to me. And your counsel will tell you this. The law in this state is if you can do something in a conforming
Right, you
way,
should do it.
you should do it that way.
and the result of that, forgetting about where we were last week, but we can't forget about it because we were here, which is we ended up trying to hide it, and your original, and you've been very upfront with us the entire time, so as much as I sometimes don't like your interruptions, in this case it was helpful, because you share with me the same frustration, which is we're actually being put in a position of, in my mind, doing the ZBA's work. And I think it's a creative solution to get around the code. And I don't mean that in a negative way. But nonetheless, that's what we're doing. And I don't think this board should be in that position. When I look at the original plan that you had, which seemed to me to be a good use of the space, and obviously the Lynches were happy with that house, which was essentially this design.
That's right, that's right.
So the client was happy.
Right.
with this, and the only thing, and the zoning code was written with the intent that there shouldn't be front yard pools, yet at the same time, and to your point, even within that neighborhood, and in fact, we're going to hear a case later on from Anthony, where there's a house that's on Armand, and it's on Armand in Moses, and I assume the pool that's on that property was granted a variance at one time. So it's not,
Let me make a suggestion,
the
if I may.
ZBA does do that.
And I did it recently on the street just behind the grade school, Burnett Street. Same situation. Met the front yard, I met the side yard. Actually, in that case, I didn't even meet the front yard setback, but it was behind the house. My suggestion, and I would, if council feels okay and you feel okay with this, I would be more than happy to, in my humble opinion, take some more of my client's time if this board were to send a message to the Zoning Board of Appeals to I withdrew it. They didn't deny it. I withdrew it.
As a matter of an alternative in working with another board. Do you feel, now understand? Well, I want to make sure before we reach or ask council.
There's no precedent.
I want to speak with the board first individually.
There's no problem.
There was still, Jeff, there was still opposition from the community with the pool in the rear.
I understand
I want to say that because
Right.
if we're going to another step, let's make sure that we realize that there's still community opposition. So, we say yes, and then we get that same opposition.
But that doesn't mean just because someone opposes it, if you feel strongly about something, that you go forward with the structure and
Before we
strength of
move
the board.
before we make that recommendation, I want this board to realize
Submit, they're gonna
there's still
oppose it.
public.
Yeah, of course that's true.
I feel we're compromising ourselves, and John is being put in an uncomfortable position proposing a design that wasn't their original intent because of this situation with the ZBA. Now, there may be other creative ways. I know there was concern about it being on South Roscoe, but if, on the other hand, but if the choices are between this with the extension, which is going to create a massive house, versus a pool on Roscoe,
Reduces the house.
which reduces the house, maybe there won't be opposition. I don't know. I can't speak for the public.
I'm in favor of it, just so that we can, just so we are on record. I'm glad that everyone has had the opportunity and to say that that's a possibility. I'm in favor of that. If this board can be an assistance to achieving that, but also at the same time eliminating one of the biggest issues, concerns of the village, and that's that homes are starting to expand, get longer, get larger. If we can do that and be able to offer that opportunity. But at the same time, now not coming back before us and saying, well, we still want more space.
Listen to me. I came to the board with, Mayron designed a house that was not as long.
Right.
I went to the Zoning Board of Appeals and gave them 5 examples of where they had given relief in the past. It's almost a textbook practical difficulty. But these 2 gentlemen in the back said, no, I'm going to tell you, just let's be honest, let's be open. It's a small community. They didn't want the variance granted because they don't want this man, for some reason, to have a pool, even though Mr. Smith in the back has a pool in the front yard, okay, in his front yard. For some reason, he doesn't think that the Lynches are worthy of having a pool. So the Zoning Board of Appeals looked at me and said, can you conform? Can you put a pool on this lot and conform? And I showed to them a building permit for an addition to the house that does exactly what this does. And I said, but I find it not aesthetically pleasing. Would you please grant us some relief as you have done in the past?
Now, there's no guarantee that that will be approved. It's just a recommendation of this board. It would still have to go through a process. So would we withdraw the application or adjourn it until they're...
Adjourn it.
Yeah.
Adjourn it.
Adjourn it.
Okay. But, and do we contact them, or how's this
Yeah,
work?
we write them a letter.
Council's right.
You're going to write them a letter?
Well, I'll draft a letter, you'll write
okay.
it.
But again, you have opposition.
Right.
Yes,
Well, let's,
understood.
I feel it's worth pursuing, because I
Thank you.
think it would be
In the end, it's less offensive.
I don't
Be like that.
to do this.
And
I've
for
been
all I,
told,
and
you
for
know.
all I know, there may be other creative solutions.
Oh my gosh, we tried.
It's on, well, but not, those creative solutions may not obfuscate the need or eliminate the need for a variance nonetheless, but that's on 3 corners. So you have, I think you're putting the driveway now on Adams Street?
See,
And, you know, I don't know where you want to
I
do
have
the
to make
front.
the 50 feet on 2 of the sides, because that's the front yard accessory setback. The 20 feet goes to the east. That's the only place I can keep the 20-foot setback. So boy, have we tried.
Okay.
But I don't think, to be very honest with you, if you look at an aerial of this neighborhood, I don't think it's fair to have somebody sandbag in such a fashion that they can't get a pool. Literally, every new house that's been
Yeah,
developed.
I don't think, I understand
because of the
there's
front
opposition, I understand there's opposition, but I think sandbagging has a negative connotation that I don't think is.
Oh, it's meant to be that way.
It's
meant to be that way.
All right, well, we'll take you at your word, John.
Let's see if there's any public comment on the application, which I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
Any public comment, please step forward.
Hi, Robert Smith, 5 Adams Lane. First, Mr. Bennett said I have a pool in the front yard. My pool is in my backyard, okay, 50 feet off of Roscoe. It's considered a backyard. I never got a variance, never needed a variance. So, no, I do not have a pool in a front yard. Nor is there any pool in any front yard that I'm aware of that isn't 50 foot back and behind the house. In terms of this application, this addition now has 16 windows in the front. The White House has 10. This is less than a half an acre. We're talking about 16 windows. I went through every single real estate brochure over the last 2 weeks to try to find anything comparable. The only things I were able to find, okay, are on 5 acres, 6 acres. It is outrageous. It is just huge. In terms of this lot, it has 3 front yards and no backyard. Village prohibition, no pool in a front yard. By definition, this property is not eligible to have a pool. Period. That's all I have to say. Going back to the ZBA, they never told them to come to you. He always knew that there was an exception 10 years ago where they approved a renovation of a 1-story house where they moved the garage to where they have it now, and you approved the bowling alley concept. That's what they're referring to. It was approval by the ARB 10 years ago, and again, it was an $86,000 renovation of a single-story ranch that approved that pool. We also pointed out, okay, to the zoning board that no notification was given on that application, but that's beside the point. It was marketed, okay, as a house, okay, with that permitted pool for 3 years. The permit expired. It should have no relevance whatsoever today. That permit is no longer valid, and it was not renewed after 3 years of trying to sell the house with the pool. Those are my comments. I just say find me a house with 16 windows across the front in the village on a half an acre. It's absurd. Thank you.
Any further public comment, please step forward.
Good evening, Fred Weinford, 45 Roscoe Drive. I'd just like to remind the the board that, and I had mentioned this at my last presentation, that when it went before the ZBA, the chairman, Kevin Guider, made the comment that there are just some lots in the village that can't take a pool. So, I can't help but feel this board has been more than accommodating to the applicant with respect to this matter. You've given them several opportunities to come back and address your concerns. And I just wonder, at what point in time do we stop this process, close the matter, and render a decision? I think you've been more than fair. I just asked you to take that into consideration. Also, with respect to the design and the appendage and what's going on with respect to this application, I don't know another house in the Roscoe community that looks like this. There are some large homes in there. I'd also like to correct some information that was given. Did a survey in the community the other day. There's 72 lots in the Roscoe community. 20 lots, on 20 lots there are large homes. That's only 28% of the community. So I'd like you to take into consideration trying to preserve what we have in the Roscoe community by not allowing architecture that is so out of keeping and creating an imbalance in our community. And again, I think you've been more than fair with the applicant. I think you should close this matter, render your decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
If I may.
Any more public comment?
Mr. Smith is correct. He does not have a pool in the front yard. It's the neighbor directly to the west. No, the east. Directly to the east has a front yard pool, was granted a variance for a front yard pool. Mr. Smith has a pool, but not in his front yard. It's the neighbor, and is a very fine gentleman. I forget his name. Malcolm, thank you. Malcolm has a pool in the front yard, and it was granted a variance for it.
Behind the house.
It's in the front yard. That's what the zoning board of appeals variance says.
Technically, John is technically right. I did read the variance that was granted, but it's a very small sliver the way the lots are configured. But technically, it's the front yard.
I just wanted to correct my mistake.
You're absolutely correct. This board has deliberated over this application, and it's always been the same concern and issue that this foreign element to extend the house to accommodate has always been the issue. There have been some architectural elements that were changed and some recommendations that were given, I think, to minimize most of the impact. I think now this board has mentioned another alternative to have you go before the other board. Okay. Because quite frankly, I agree with you, Jeff. It seems like they're always kicking the can down the street, and we seem to be the board of the last decision. So if we give our recommendation to do so, and let that board decide, or figure, they are, and I like this because it says, they're in position to determine whether it's reasonable and acceptable. Mm-hmm. Allow them to do so.
I agree.
And if something or you're unable to get that approval, then it's gone through as much of a process as it possibly could. And then in which case this board will consider it at that time independently.
I appreciate it.
But they're qualified to make those evaluations. Allow them to do so. And then, council, you'll be able to prepare that letter by the next meeting to be voted on?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I see a hand in the back. Please step forward. I can't catch you on the record. You have to step forward.
The only thing I do want to add is I don't think it's fair, and I get this quite often, I don't think it's fair to criticize an applicant for the length of time the process takes when the applicant is continually trying to work with the board, coming back with different iterations.
You're going to get critiqued in every portion, whether it's fair or not. It's up for critique, and therefore...
It wasn't directed at you, it was directed at the...
I understand, but it's a person that's gone before enough boards, I know it's a critique.
It's often directed at us, too.
Yes.
I think I have an aerial here, and it pertains to the property, Malcolm Braveman's property that was brought up.
Okay.
Let's get my bearings here. This is Malcolm's house. This is Adams Lane. His house faces on Adams. And I think that request for a variance pertained to, you see this little sliver on the back here? That's South Roscoe Drive that spins around here. And it's because of that little strip that he needed a variance. Here's his pool. It's directly, as you can see, here's the house. It's directly behind the house. And because of this little strip here facing on South Roscoe, he was required to get a variance. I think that's a stretch.
That's the reason why this board's saying that administrative board should do that review with our recommendation that because we, from an aesthetic standpoint and a design detail standpoint, do not feel that what's being presented as an alternative is reasonable before this board.
Okay,
so we're saying that they're more qualified to do so, allow that board to do, and that's what they're in position to do. To determine whether it's reasonable with the understanding that we'll give a recommendation to do so. But there's no guarantee. Again, you still have that opportunity as a community to go and dispute and debate before that board and continually making your argument. And then we'll see what the...
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the pool is behind the house.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Anything further from the board? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to adjourn the application per the applicant's request. The adjournment will be based on written decision by, written recommendation by council to the ZBA. And with that said, determining how long their application will take, it would probably have to be reposted in mail if it would have to come back before us.
That's fine.
Okay?
To be determined.
To be determined.
But you're just going to kick it over.
Great.
Thank you.
So the motion will be to approve the applicant's request to adjourn.
Motion to approve the applicant Christopher and Jean Lynch, 58 Roscoe Drive, request to adjourn
And
authorize council to prepare a letter to be sent to the ZBA for our consideration of this property, because we feel it would be
that's a long recommendation.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
To the ZBA, how's that?
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Sorry.
Motion by
Whatever she
Susan,
said.
second by Jeff. All in favor, Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Sorry.
Aye.
And I'm a nod as well.
I
Thank
was
you.
trying to condense it, it just didn't work. All right.
All right, if we can get Christine.
Hey. Now we can get on here. Now, is this just a typo that it has is that zeros? That was just, it's not. It's
like someone put
zero or
zeros.
something. Is that not?
Yeah, no, that's a typo. That's a typo.
It's been coming down the road. It's
Yeah.
like 3 different meetings. This goes back.
Goes back.
Oh.
Here's 4 of them.
Anthony Hobson for Grosero Properties.
We're going to call the application open.
The question is, the letter that's going to be sent to the zoning board a matter of public record that we can get a copy of?
Yes, sir, it is.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Grosero Properties LLC, 63 Armand Street.
Edition of second story
Here we
edition.
go.
Second story edition.
You have all plans, have these plans been part of the file?
Yes.
Okay, great. And these are the short elevations, there's nothing been changed since the last,
Yes, there have been
Yes, there
changes.
has.
Big changes.
Let me tell you about the changes.
Big change.
Since the last submission, I got a phone call from John Foster Tuesday that the setbacks were wrong
okay.
on the side yard. I had a meeting with 10 back in December, and they were told me that there were 10-foot setbacks, when in actuality the new code says they're 15. So I had to reduce that side yard setback. I had to chop off 5 feet off the house.
Okay.
So in doing so, I moved that 5 feet to the pool side in order to regain the lost square footage. And in doing so, the house has more of a symmetrical addition to it now. I get a higher plate height, so it's higher a higher headroom inside the master suite. And I changed the siding to match the existing cedar shingle siding. Same thing with the existing, the roof. And then I had to move the entrance from the pool side to the Armand side because I was too close to the pool if I had my entrance, if it matched the old entry.
So you have 2 entries on Armand.
Armand, right. Because with pulling it 5 feet towards the pool, I probably would have stepped out maybe 2 or 3 feet right into the pool, and I thought that was a safety hazard, so we had to move it to the other side. But it's in like kind with the old,
Two entries on Armand?
I'm looking at the
if you look at the old existing entrance on number 3, proposed south elevation, on page A200,
Yeah, okay. This was the original.
that's just the original.
Oh,
That's the
he's got
original.
that. I have it here, but you're kidding.
Well, thank you for adhering to the recommendations of keeping the facade match from old to new. It definitely is more in keeping. I see the limitations you have with regards to the entryway, especially specifically out to the pool, and you have that same concern where you have basically multiple front yards because you're at an intersection and you're literally the front yard of the parcel is at an intersection. So creates a difficult both design detail and lot configuration.
Exactly.
Jeff, do you have any issues, concerns?
It worked out well. One, in terms of you adapting, changing your style in terms of the materials and the look and the shingles and so on. And then it's somewhat fortuitous, maybe not for your client, but for us in terms of the scaling of the property. The house looks more in keeping with the 5. And sometimes less is more.
Right.
And in this case, less is more. You've got a better looking house.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
Susan?
I have no opposition. I think it's an improvement.
Christina?
I think the addition's bigger than the house, but it's a challenge.
You have it was a teeny house to begin with.
Yeah.
Small house.
Quite frankly, most applicants probably would have torn it down and built out as much as they possibly could.
Right.
And
They're a young couple, and the money that they spent on this house, I don't think they had it in their budget to tear it down and to rebuild. So
More power to them.
that's fine. I have no further concerns or issues. Is there any public comment on the application?
Great.
Motion to approve.
It's still going to be smaller scale than the house next to it.
It's going to be the smallest house on that street.
It'll be my neighbor.
okay.
Motion to approve.
I make a motion that we approve the application of Ristoro Properties on Almond Street.
Motion by Christina.
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And I will too.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Good luck.
Have a great night. Okay, your turn.
I was told that this one has an issue. I fixed it.
Next application, please.
Village Bellows at 33 Bellows Lane.
The applicant present?
Oh, they are?
We're going to resolve.
So,
Here, let me pass this to him.
this way? That's the other way. Yeah.
Is that a deck with an umbrella?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Your name for the record, please.
Nice try.
My name's Christopher Burnside. I'm the owner.
Okay. Please present your application.
Okay, so at the last meeting, I proposed a new house to be built at 33 Bellows. I wasn't at the meeting. Ian came on my behalf. You guys made some recommendations for the design, which I think I've met all your kind of requests. I think the biggest issue that you had with the design. You mentioned, I think, on the record that it was top-heavy and you didn't like the overhangs, the eaves. So I went back to Fleetwood and McMullen, and we basically eliminated the Dutch kind of gables that we had to do in order to meet the pyramid. So the front elevation
Is that why you had to
shows.
put gables? Because you had to, pyramid issues?
There weren't necessarily pyramid issues. I think what happened is on the side yard, the side yard to the property, we had to do it, so we were just trying to make it consistent throughout the building design. And by doing the Dutch kind of gables, I think that's what you call it, it forced us into a situation where we had kind of larger overhangs in order to get that. So that was, it is required on a couple of the gables, which you can see in the design. I have the original plan.
It's required?
Well, in order to meet the pyramid law, right, you have to kind of lop off the corner to meet the, so you have nothing in that 45-degree angle. Also, I think originally, when we were designing the house, there was a house on Bellows already, a brand-new house, which kind of fueled the design for this house to some extent, because I was trying to keep it consistent with the neighborhood. This is a brand-new house on the same street with the same gables, but...
Well, they're not the same
They're
gables.
not the same.
Well, the overhangs are actually larger than the overhangs I was proposing.
It's still so,
Yeah, but what, if you can, just as a matter of, a point of reference, that you use as an example, the bell, you reduced the bell itself, and although you have these swooping gables, and I think that's what's creating kind of the top heaviness of the building.
Well, I accomplished that. My original plan from the architect that we designed, it had 30-inch overhangs. We cut it in half, and we got rid of now they're like 13 inches and change. So I'm not sure. And then you mentioned the height of the building. So we now put the floor joists we did a split sill foundation. We lowered the building a foot that way, or 12 inches for the floor joist. And then we also went from 11-foot first floor ceilings to 10-foot first floor ceilings. We reduced that a foot, and then we did, instead of 10-foot plate heights on the second floor, down to 9-foot, and we brought the whole building down 3 feet, and it's well within the height restriction now by 34 inches. So. And we're not even close to the pyramid now on the sides because we've shrank the building down to your suggestion, which actually I think looks better now than before. There's no variances needed. We even cut down the height of the chimney. We cut that down almost 2 feet. So now it's not as prominent. We took out all the aesthetic of the architectural design with it was a prominent part of the house. We cut it down so it didn't seem so tall. The thing about the property that is that it's on Bellows. There is a medical center to the right of it, which it's not going to affect, it's the best thing that happened to this lot. And the front of it, you're on Hampton Road, so I own that property as well. So I own from the two properties contiguous. So I think there was another comment that you had that you were concerned about a kind of a master bedroom deck. But first of all, the master bedroom deck overlooks a parking lot, and I own the piece in front. It's one contiguous piece, and it looks out at Hampton Road. So what I did and it's a commercial rental place. So what I did is, to kind of address your concern, I built a 2-foot planter around the deck, and I, showed some pictures of some little plantings in there, but it doesn't affect doesn't affect the neighbors. In fact, when you had me send the notice out for all the adjacent neighbors, not only did I send the notice out, but I sent the plans and the pictures that you have just to see if anybody had comments. And I got a couple phone calls from the neighbors saying that it's a beautiful house, good luck. Nobody seemed to object. But I still took everything that you asked me to do into consideration. The fireplace, there's an outdoor fireplace that's attached to the little pool cabana, but that was not, I think there was a misunderstanding with that. That's just a small gas fireplace that is more for an aesthetic look. There is no heat in the outdoor pool house. It's a summer room, and that pool, that you don't see it again from, there's no neighbors to come, like, you're right next door to Red Bar. I mean, doesn't have any effect on the building. It's not for heating the space. It's an outdoor fireplace. It's gas. It's literally in front of the garage, because it's a garage on one side for a car, and then it's just a little cabana with a changing room.
The concern was that, and now that you're saying that it's a gas fireplace, is the girth of the chimney.
I shrank it.
I'm sorry?
I shrank the size of the whole chimney has been cut down.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. At the last meeting, that was the issue. The challenge was that you had this massive chimney coming out of a pool house.
Right. It was like, again, this is Fleetwood and McMullen. They've done plenty of houses in the village. They tried, they're used to building big mansions. He told me that this is the first house that's under 3,000 square feet that he's ever designed. Trying to think of what else. And I basically even did the same with the garage. I matched the pool house overhangs to the main house, which is as minimum as we could make it. There's no other way of eliminating that, and it's, like I said, it's well below the 32-foot maximum height restriction.
Christine, you have comments?
Well, the deck with the umbrella, the upstairs deck is not something that we want to see in the village overlooking a neighbor.
Well, there's no neighbor. That's my point. There is no neighbor.
It's a medical building.
That is a medical building parking lot, and I own the property in front of it.
Which is also commercial.
Which is also commercial, and there's a 50-foot buffer for whatever reason. I'm going to plant a hedge going across Hampton Road anyway, just for privacy, so I'm not looking at cars driving by. So I don't think there's any reason why you can't put a little planter with some plants up there for that.
So we understand, the concerns about second-story deck were always about privacy, not that you can't have them. We have approved decks, second-story decks, but when they become an issue where you could possibly have privacy concerns to the neighbors. His argument is the neighbor is a parking lot, a medical building, and he's putting up hedges.
I understand.
And also, not
To me, the
that
house
it matters,
looks
but I've now
fabulous.
reduced the first floor height from 11 foot. I've reduced the first floor that's down from 11 feet to 10 feet. It's not like you're 20 feet up above the ground. I mean, you're talking 10 feet above. It's, a little bit higher. I mean, there's nothing standing up there. You're still not going to even see the parking lot.
Christine, you have more comments?
I just, looking at this plan, even acknowledging the location of it, the house looks top-heavy, and the deck contributes to that. And the pool house looks very substantial.
No, I think it could be the rendering also. I mean, the pool house is actually a garage. It's a one-car garage, which the minimum size that you can have for a garage is 12 feet.
This part is the pool house, though, right?
The pool house is, what I did is, it's a two-car garage cut in half. Half of the house is a garage and half is a pool house. The garage portion is basically big enough to put in, if you're a good driver, SUV. I mean, I measured my car. I mean, it's 13 feet wide. I can barely, the garage door, on each side of the garage door, I have 8 inches of space to get my car in. I mean, I can't squeeze a pool house any smaller. I have the ability for lot coverage to make my pool house bigger, and it's not maxed. I don't want to have a huge pool house overpowering the building, so, I was like, listen, don't make it too big. I'd rather have a little bit more space. I'd rather have some kind of like little aesthetic with a fireplace, a little sitting area. I mean, it's tight. All these lots are tight.
Susan, comments?
I also think this gable, it just makes it so heavy.
There's no way that's required for the pyramid.
Well, it's not
Yes, it's not.
What he's saying is that he had to
No, I
clip it, yeah.
understand that, but there is a way. It's just if there's a will, there's a way.
But didn't you say you dropped the
I dropped the whole building 3
Right, it just
feet.
seems so bulky.
That side of the house, listen, you're not seeing that
I'm
house
seeing
from
it.
any point. You can't see that from the street. You can't see it from the side. That's the side of the house.
There are only 3 elevations, is that side
There's a front
missing?
and a rear elevation, but this side of the house, this is the side of the house. This isn't the
This
front.
side, we don't have an elevation.
And even though you dropped the height, you still have to clip those gables.
On the side yard,
what you're
I
saying.
could,
What about this one? Is that
this is
outside?
required. I would love to
He
eliminate
has
that.
he has a pyramid diagram.
There, it's,
So
it's,
there's still a report, yeah.
I see. I'm
He's still
sorry.
falling.
Yeah, okay.
Anything further?
No. Except, is this all shingled? Is this a
the whole
different
thing
color, or
is all
that's just the
no,
rendering?
it's just the shadow.
Okay, that's what I
It's just
figured, but I
a
just wanted to
natural
ask.
cedar shingle, just like,
I actually, except for the exceptional heaviness of this, which I think could be addressed in some way,
but that's the main ridge of the house, the whole house. This section
it just...
of the house is the second floor.
It still comes off as this really bulky, heavy thing to me.
The house isn't even 29 feet tall.
It's
That's not.
nevertheless, from my perspective, the rest of it is quite lovely, but this...
But there's no, you don't see it. It's the side of that, it's the end of the
I
gable.
don't think I
It's
should
the
feel
gable
that you
end.
can't see it, because it is a house on
No, but
Bella
it's
Street.
a house packed on the side of a parking lot.
So,
And there's
you
no...
still can see it. It's still the village. I don't want to
where?
argue.
So,
Jeff, any comments?
Thank you. So you pointed out that this was the first house at Fleetwood
This is a recess.
McMullen built under 3,000 feet, and perhaps that's why it looks the way it does, and I hope Fleetwood Mac or McMullen doesn't take offense to that. Yeah, I know, I said that on purpose. Sorry about that. The point is, and I'm sharing with what the other folks are saying, is yes, it's within the pyramid laws, and those are limits. That doesn't mean that you have to go out to those. It then comes to us to look at it, to see whether it's architecturally pleasing, consistent with the neighborhood. Now, you mentioned that there are no neighbors of note at the moment, but as you know, the hospital is in the process of being sold.
It's a medical building.
The medical building, and I don't know what's going to happen with the other properties around that area. And so, please, let me just finish up. Okay, so there could very well be neighbors in the future who will have a view of this. So it's incumbent upon us, at least I think it is, to look at it not as some piece of, some structure that's not going to be seen. I have to assume that it will be seen. And the comment of top-heavy seems to be repeated by all, and whether it's feasible, whether it's desirable, it looks like you're already in the process of selling the house, given the thing from Brown Harris. But so, as you were saying, where there's a will, there's a way. If you were to knock off those sides and make it more consistent, less of an angle and less square and less block heavy, top heavy. This is reminiscent of a house that I wish had not been built on 104.
If you look at the floor plan on that bedroom upstairs, the plate height on that side is already 8 feet. I mean, I guess if you put a two-story house, just a square box up like that, it would be more volume in that than there would be in this. I mean, it's basically an expanded cape. I mean, I kept the height of the building is down, it's not obtrusive.
I'll give you a lot of poetic license, but an expanded cape, no. A Dutch, you've got Dutch, it's not an expanded cape in my limited design.
It's a gable
of-
traditional house.
It's a Dutch colonial type of gables, you've got openings on the side, you got a lot of stuff going here.
Right, so
It's not an expanded cape.
here's another house on Bellows. This is on the same kind of thing, on a half-acre, 6,000-foot house with a gable, a hip, a half-round porch. I mean, this is consistent with the neighborhood. There's no question in my mind that what is here in that other house that I showed you with the gables is the same style, both in the same genre, in the same neighborhood, within a stone's throw away. And you can't tell me that your opinion is, because I have to clip the side here, that is going to make a decision of whether or not you approve the building or not. I don't.
Actually, it is, but it's okay.
It's just like, I mean.
We do have the license to do so. I just want to, just because I think this will maybe clear things up. That section of the house, which everyone seems to feel is top-heavy, that's coming from the living room going out to a covered porch, correct? So that's an enclosed porch. It's not
That's part of it.
This is not an enclosed porch?
No,
That's the master bedroom.
It's the master
Yeah,
bedroom.
that's the
So
problem.
if you see on the floor plans on the
With a
second
covered
floor,
With a,
It's not a covered,
No
no,
porch.
there's no porch on it.
it's just the,
well, I have second floor master bedroom, and then I have deck. Am I missing something? Here?
This is. the
Right, that's just
deck.
like a little, yes, that is like a little window. It's like a little,
Covered, second story, deck.
it's not, there's no door going out to that deck, it's a window.
But it's an opening here. This is not, these are all open. It's all open. There's no windows there. It's a enclosed or recess.
Right, that matches the porch underneath it.
I'm just asking yes or no
Okay,
if it is.
so yeah.
If it is, okay. So that's lesional space. It's not part of the, because what you're saying, it's not part of the bedroom. So therefore, do you need the roof heights in the covered
Okay,
porch?
so my point that I was trying to say is that that part of the house that is expanded here is what is this covered area underneath it. So if I literally lopped it off the way you were saying here.
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying.
No, but
Everyone else, okay.
But what I'm trying to explain is that this design here was driving the ability to have the overhang to, like the little porch, which is like 2 feet, just to walk from.
A deep porch.
It's only 2 feet.
Yeah,
It's
I
not-
get that. I'm trying to
This house is
define.
3,000 square feet.
I'm just trying, to be honest with you, I like the design of the house overall. That side, there's just something quirky about it, and we're trying to come to a resolution
No,
to get you to a place.
I tried to take this in one of my designs where it was just like a railing, like a little deck, and that was terrible. Then I tried to do a gambrel on that side. That didn't work because it had 2 gables and a gambrel on like this on that side. That didn't work because it messed up the gables and tying them all in. Then we tried to just eliminate this whole porch originally. That was like, okay, but then there was no way to get from the back of the house to the front, without like going out the thing. So, I mean, we've
Can't you
explored a
still
lot of.
have a first floor covered porch and not have the decking area coming out to the bedroom, coming out from the bedroom?
Can't I have the first
You
floor?
can still have
This is a-
as a covered porch, but not have the closed-in, whatever you want to, it's a second story enclosed deck, anywhere you look at, coming out from the bedroom, correct? It could still be a covered porch there. You can still have a deck on one story. You can still have a deck and not allow it, or not have it enclosed, and therefore you don't have to have that strong deformed gable.
This is the problem.
Do you understand what I mean, Chris?
I understand what you're saying. You're asking to basically cut the roof out,
Take the roof off.
but you're
Keep
just,
it open-ended. Still have your front.
But the whole roof,
Yeah.
the whole roof structure is actually, that ridge comes down, the load gets transferred down the side onto these columns. These are structural columns that are tied into the foundation. So it's not like you can just whack off that side of the house and cantilever that roof over. It's,
No, that's not.
That's not true, yeah.
this roof is being
He's only
supported by
saying,
these columns.
push that gable wall back
Yeah,
So,
just push it back and you get that.
so that it would
So you-
align with the wall on the first floor. And the
You have
projected
an uncovered
porch would
front
only
porch.
come out on one story.
Well,
the problem is
Oh, this is the.
That's, I believe that's.
yeah, I mean, but you're not gonna cut this roof back to here, because that's the
No,
bedroom.
not that far back.
Well, that's the wall.
Well, I think he's saying going back to here. I'm trying to interpret.
this is the bedroom coming out to that deck right there.
Just skip
Yes,
the deck.
yes.
Miss the deck, right?
So-
Skip the deck.
What is the length of the deck to the bedroom door?
The length of the deck, well, you have the plans there, I think it's about 2 foot 6 inches.
You don't have the plans for that, a
You
renting
have the
of that
full,
side
well,
of
on
the
the
house?
original,
On the original, it didn't change.
it didn't
from-
change.
Okay, so it would be an original design. So there.
Oh, okay. They changed it.
No, you didn't.
No, we only changed the gables, we only changed the things that you asked, gave you the corresponding change as 2.2, 2.1, and 2.3.
This me, now that I look at it. This is from December 7th.
So your plans say it's 7 feet. 7 feet, 6 inches.
7 feet, 6 inches from the face of the
From your face of your
building
gable to your bedroom.
to the inside of the bedroom wall,
Yes,
the 7 feet.
7 feet, 6 inches.
Okay, so you're saying cut it back how many feet?
However many you can do.
I'm saying that instead of having a enclosed covered porch,
Cut it.
have a traditional.
I mean, the distance from the edge of this overhang, from the edge of that dormer to the edge of that, is the same distance as the edge of this dormer to the edge of here.
We should,
So the edge of the dormer on the right side of the house is the same as the edge of the dormer, it's all consistent. I mean, I could put a little dormer if you want. I could make a dormer that, if you're worried about just this being a blank piece, I can continue this dormer right here.
No, what we're trying to do, we're trying to help this board approve your application.
No, but I'm saying I could, if it's consistent, or
And if
break
you
it up.
can gain another 6 feet, 6 to 7 feet by pushing that back, and now you don't have to clip your gable so radically and create this deformed front gable, it becomes more traditional. That's what we're trying to get to.
The side an end gable.
Yes.
End gable.
on the east,
No, he's saying run this straight.
just lose it.
He's saying cut it back, but you can't. You have a pen I can show you. Like you can't. If you can't just cut the roof off right to here.
Try.
And you
Right,
can't
like
angle
here,
it?
right?
And
that's going to change the.
Yeah. Because this is, all of this,
Then it would be proper.
here, that's 7 feet.
Right, so
Right.
it's either
You're right.
that or...
But then that distance here, from this gable, from here to here, is not going to be the same from here to here. I'm going to have this little tiny.
You have a deck, you have an overhang, you have everything you're looking for the first floor, which is why you, I think, built out so far, so that you could have that first floor overhang in a sitting area.
And a deep.
Well, I didn't put that. I didn't build this out. I built this out so I can have this little porch on the side.
That's what I'm talking about.
So you're saying keep the porch on the side, and then how do you propose?
Just a little gable roof.
Just a little
Yeah,
bit, yeah.
gable roof.
At the base
Plenty
of
of
that
people
gable.
have
Just a little
a
kitchen.
porch that doesn't have the whole, covered by the top of the house.
You're going to put a half wall here? Make
I
this
don't
a
know.
solid wall?
That has to be worked out.
I mean, then you're doing the same thing. You're just chopping this out.
Yeah.
Like this as a
somehow-
You're
railing.
not chopping your front gable, you have a traditional gable that's shown. You have a second-story deck that gives you the overhang for your first floor
Either like that or
covered
like
porch.
this.
Well, I don't know why they can't go this way.
Right.
What's wrong with this?
Maybe she can draw something and.
I mean,
You want her to draw?
I'm just saying, we went through this. I mean,
Somebody draw something to show
I
me
have a
what you're talking
plan that did that, and I thought it just looked like you just cut the building out and just had like a railing here off the master, and it just was like, okay, that architecturally I thought looked odd, as opposed to just continuing the roof over. I mean,
What I see is the two gables to the right look, and the porch and everything else looks very nice. And then we get to this bulky thing to the left that just doesn't fit in. It makes it so heavy.
well, this mass right here is a dormer. I mean, I was saying just continue this dormer here,
Well, there you go.
and then I would just
I
fake it
don't-
and put a couple windows in here.
An angle.
That's an alternative. It's better than, so now you're saying instead of, you'll have a front gable rather than a side gable.
No, I would keep the front gable. You can't eliminate that.
Yeah.
Because that's the head height, but I would just, this gable runs straight across here for head height, so I would just match it here and to break up that space. I don't think, to cut this roof off, I've already been down the road with the architect on this, and it just looked terrible because
Can
this
you
was
angle it so that it just,
it would be the same.
it's the bulk of that thing.
See how this is a shed? This is like a shed roof right here. It's like a shed roof here, and then it continues here, and then it stops here. But
So
I
it
think
would just-
I think the view I think it's the elevation of the pictorial elevation that is throwing you off, because in real,
But the first time we saw it, we had the same objections to that.
Chris, the side gable, it's not clipped. That's on the other side, isn't it?
that is on, yeah, that's on
I hate to go, well, we have to
Yeah,
go
it
north,
just goes
south,
out
east,
straight.
east, and west. So the house right now is facing,
We don't know.
yeah, that's the side, that's the master, that's the,
the opposite side
The
of the
opposite
master.
side of the house,
And
yes.
that's what side of the house? That the east side, west side,
Yeah,
north?
I think
I want, for record purposes, I want to make sure we're in the right direction.
Well, it says it right
says
there
on the-
bottom.
front elevation, side
So
elevation.
I'm on side elevation, A203.
Let me bring it to it here on this one. But that's the other side, the opposite side of the house.
And it just goes,
I think that's
Can I say something?
No, 2-1. But that elevation doesn't have a porch. It's not supporting a porch on that side.
the porch is supporting the second floor, no?
It is, but on the other side, the other gable end doesn't have a porch.
Right.
So there's no roof to support it. There's no roof over it. I mean, there's a deck.
Add something, and by the way, you can cut me off if you don't think it's helpful. Sometimes we say we're not in the business of designing houses, but we do make recommendations. I have a feeling we're designing your house.
Yeah.
A couple of things. One, like you said, this fellow hasn't designed a house this small. I think it's reflected in the design. Secondly, there's been a bit of presumption. You have a real estate piece that it's a fait accompli. I mean, there was no consideration as to what this board does, and so now you want us to design a house, and if it still comes back and it's top-heavy, you're going to say to us, hey, I did exactly what you said. I don't want to be in that position. Everybody on this board has said it's top-heavy. It's your responsibility, despite the fact that Brown Harris is trying to sell something that hasn't been approved, to go back to the drawing board and create something that is just not top-heavy, Chris. I'm sorry, I'm not going to sit here and design it. I'm not an architect.
I would normally, I don't like to argue. I just feel like, you're basing a decision on a piece of property that's next to a medical parking lot, that faces Hampton Road, that's well within the architectural sites as every other house that's going up. I would argue that this house, the gables are top-heavy and 35 inches tall, like 35 inches wide. I would argue that the other house has 5 different architectural styles in a traditional house.
We're not talking about that house, we're talking
No, but I'm
about
just
this
saying that there's no, I don't agree with you. I like the house the way I described it.
That I can appreciate, and you won't be the first, but I don't know at this point going into much detail. I mean, Curtis has been far more explicit than he's usually been.
So I'll come back, I'll give you 3 to decide, and you pick which one you want, because I'll give you a deck on the side like you want.
Chris, I think after this evening, the video will be online. I would go back to the video, take basically some of the different details and discussions to be said with your architect, who can, I mean, it's one thing, and I know you experienced salesperson and you know homes, you've been in probably thousands of homes, but sometimes, you need a person who can put it and interpret it on paper, like an architect or a designer. That's, I think, sit down with your architect, listen to some of the things that have been said this evening, to come up with a rendering which is been keeping. And trying to help out as best as we possibly can to get you to the next level, but it doesn't seem like it's being understood.
So that's the only thing that you are objecting to on this project, is that overhang that you think is top heavy.
Chris, if you come back with another design...
I'm just
if you
asking.
come back with another design, we'll look at the totality of the application, and as long as everything is within keeping, it's balanced, it looks...
But all my other changes are acceptable.
Christina said she objected to the second floor deck. I think there was some other concern about that.
Well, the second floor deck was discussed, and I believe...
that's the danger when you have us designing something. You're gonna parse words of what was approved.
No, I'm just saying, I addressed the deck because you had concerns about the location and proximity to other residential houses.
I think we're past the deck.
So the deck, I just want to make sure we're past it.
We're past the second story.
We're past the fireplace.
Now our concerns are in the totality of the design. Everything's up for grabs. I don't want you to think you're walking away from here and now we can't discuss anything else. It has to balance. So whatever changes your architect makes, it still has to be a balanced design throughout.
But the overall aesthetic of this style and the gables is consistent with
Cedar
what
shingle
you
white trim,
find to
sure.
be is acceptable.
That's cedar shingle white trim, the acceptable design. However, the architectural design and features have to still be balanced. So again, that's why it's easier sometimes for us to have architects come before us, because there are things that could be said that they could now interpret and put it into a design, which is easier sometimes than you and I, who need to see things for what they are.
So I can take the same house that is on Bellows that just coincidentally fits.
That's not what we said. That's not what we said. That's definitely.
No, but I'll make the changes, I'll change it, but I'll give you a few other options, and then I think I'm out of options unless I just design the same house that's...
We're not telling you to do that. We're saying that, please have a discussion with the architect. I'm sure if he reviews this meeting this evening, he will, or she would be able to come up with a reasonable design.
I don't think I have a choice. Okay.
So you're going to come back with those designs. You're asking the board to adjourn so you can prepare yourself.
Well, right, because you're not going to approve it, correct? So, okay, so then I have to adjourn.
Any public comment on the application? All right, motion to approve applicant's request to adjourn until the next meeting?
Should I just have my pen down? The applicant Village Bellows at 33 Bellows Lane to adjourn to our next meeting.
The motion is by Christina. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor. Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next application, please.
Robert Ambrose. Street. Poor thing.
How are you? My name's James O'Neill, and I'm the contractor for the project.
James, do you have smaller plants?
Nothing.
Oh.
You should have been instructed by the village building department.
She made me give 2 or 3 of those.
Okay, just if you ever do come before us again in the future, we request that you bring
11 by
sworn designs.
17s. Okay.
Applications to construct a pool house.
A pool house, yes.
Board members, have you had the opportunity to review the application?
Yes.
Any questions, comments, concerns?
No.
The materials match the existing house?
Yes, cedar shake, white trim. Although this will have a cedar roof, and the house currently has a asphalt roof, but he wants to change that.
And it fits and complies within current zoning, all setbacks as well as height. Any
yeah.
public comment on the application?
Is it in the backyard?
I'm sorry?
Is it in the backyard behind the house? I have a house on Hilda Street. Is it in the backyard behind the house?
Yes.
Is it visible from the street?
Okay. It's in the rear. It is not it will not be visible from the street.
You want to see the site plan?
Okay. Any other public comment? Motion to approve?
Make motion that we approve the application of Robert Ambrose on Hildreth Street to construct a pool house.
A motion is by Christina. Is there a second?
Second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor. Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Right.
And final application for this evening?
Greenblatt Trust on Meadow Lane.
Yeah.
Good evening. This is just a copy of everything that was already submitted, but for your use.
I think it's
You've become the Meadow Lane
yeah, you're the
architect
man.
of choice.
Oh, I'm trying. My name's Glenn Cordova. I'm from Blaze McQuaid Architecture. This is a project that is down on the western end of Meadow Lane, all the way towards the end. It's a 2-story flat roof structure. Materials consist of cedar siding, which would be stained in ebony, somewhere in between these 2 shades.
Whoa, cedar siding?
That's the black.
Oh, okay.
Complemented by a honed limestone panel, which would ground the house. It extends vertically, also from the first floor down to the landscape. The house would consist of black aluminum framed windows. We do have some renderings here. I'm going to add 2 more. This is from the street, as well as from the beach. You can see that there's significant wetlands and dune on the south side. On the north side of Meadow Lane, there's significant wetlands that we had to comply to. That was determined by a previous approval. The house had a 12,000 square foot approval for a different house that was grandfathered in when the homeowner purchased it. We are adhering to all the same square footages and setbacks.
I'm assuming, is it the pool house?
There is a pool house,
Okay,
yes.
No, I'm assuming what I'm looking at is the pool house, so we'll show this portion of it. It's the cabana. Seems to be a second-story pavilion or glass, encased in glass?
Yes, it is a second-story balcony, terrace. And the reason being is that from the first floor, and you can see in this picture here, from the first floor, you can't actually see the ocean. So you have to get up to the second floor, so there's no exterior space in which you can actually see the ocean, so.
I don't think I've ever seen a second-story accessory structure with a second-story deck.
We do still adhere to the height restrictions, and there is significant screening as well.
And is that a glass encasing?
It's just a glass railing.
Glass railing.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a beautiful house. I mean, I don't know what's, that was my only question. I just saw the little stairs going up, and I'm glad you enclosed the stairway so it's not on the outside. I kept everything very tight, very neat. That's a very, very smart design. Thank you. I know it's not in the historic district, however, very important community, very important location. Any questions, comments, concerns, or design detail?
No, I think it's quite beautiful.
Yes.
Beach house. It's very beautiful.
Jeff, any comments?
Yeah, no comments, just a question. From the aerial shot, that is the house?
That is the house,
Yeah.
correct.
No.
Right next to that wrap
Susan,
house.
comments?
No, I think it's a handsome house.
Thank you.
Congratulations, good job. Any public comments on the application? Motion to approve.
I make a motion that we approve the application of Janine Black, 2015 Trust on Meadow Lane.
I second the motion.
Motion by Christina, second by Susan. All in favor, Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well.
Thank you very much, I appreciate your time.
Wait,
Wish you could see these homes after the,
yeah.
All right, we have left on our agenda minutes. Minutes from our last meeting, January 8th. All board members were present. Any questions, comments, concerns, or issue with the minutes? Any corrections necessary?
No, not that I saw.
Okay.
There was the spelling of one name.
There's a spelling in there. Okay. So motion would be with all corrections, the approval of the minutes from January 8th, 2018.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from January 8th of our meeting of the Board of Architectural Review and Historic Preservation with the necessary corrections.
Moved by, motion by Christina, is there a second?
Second motion.
Second by Susan, all in favor, Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye as well.
And I'm Ralph. And motion to close this evening's meeting of the ARB, Southampton Village.
I make a motion that we close this meeting of the Board of Architecture.
Excuse me, you have a question out here?
Yes, and forgive me, Fred Weinford again concerning the 58 Rothko Drive matter.
The hearing was closed.
Yeah, that's, yeah, I do.
This is an ex parte communication. The hearing's closed.
I'm looking for guidance.
This is why I sat here, because this was supposed to be taken care of at the hearing. This is inappropriate. This board, everyone's talking about, there's a reason why you have a public hearing with the applicant there and everyone's here. I object to this communication. Object to this communication.
Yeah, I'm looking for clarification.
Is this clarification that is required to be on record, or you just want questions about what's in the procedure?
Let him propose it first.
Yeah, it can be on record. I just need some guidance and understanding as to, I know the recommendation was that this go back to the ZBA. Now, my question is it going back to ZBA with what I refer to as the appendage?
No,
The old plan.
the original plan
The
without
old
the
plan,
appendage.
without
Yes.
the appendage.
Correct. It's an alternative to that. Okay? We're not going to, hold on.
Wasn't it the applicant that withdrew the application?
Excuse me, with all due respect, I understand you may have some concerns, some issues. This, just so that there's clarification and you understand.
That's what I would like.
We've asked that that appendage be removed. We don't feel that it's in keeping. We feel that the previous board is using our board.
You want the Board of Appeals to decide on the merits.
Okay.
That's the end of it.
Okay, on the merits. There you go.
Yes, there you go.
Without the appendage, so we're back to a swimming pool in the front yard.
Whatever way they want to propose it.
All right, I'm just concerned about.
I understand that.
If the appendage is there, the ZBA is going to say.
That's up to them. That's up to them. We're asking the Board of Appeals to decide the swimming pool on the merits of the zoning board.
This is not the way government is supposed to function. It really isn't.
Okay.
Please.
Are they putting the appendage on without your approval?
There's no approval from this board. This board has referred it back to the Board of Appeals to ask the Board of Appeals to decide the pool on the merits.
With a statement that you are against the appendage?
Please, come on, this is
Yes,
now...
with the statement that this board prefers the zoning board to make the decision on the pool.
Without the appendage?
With or without?
It
That's
doesn't
important.
make a difference. It's
It does
whatever.
make a
It
difference.
does not, sir. Don't argue with me. John, stop. Stop it, please. Stop it. It's already been decided. They can do what they want. The board is asking, referring it back to the Board of Appeals so the Board of Appeals can decide the swimming pool in the ground on the merits.
But with the, if I may.
We're going to close this evening's meeting.
That's the end of it.
That's the end.
Fine, because that's exactly what I asked the ZBA to do in the first place.
There's a motion on the table. The motion was to close this evening's meeting. There was a second by Susan Stevenson. Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Have a good night.
Good night.